The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, carried by a dust-covered rider who didn't wait for a reply. Claire Hartley stood in the doorway of the boarding house, her fingers trembling slightly as she broke the wax seal. The October wind whipped at her dark skirts, carrying the scent of coming snow down from the mountains. She'd sent out 17 inquiries for work, 17 letters to ranches, schools, and establishments across Wyoming territory. This was the first response in 3 months. Miss Hartley. Your letter regarding the position of nurse and housekeeper has been received. I require someone with knowledge of basic medicines and the treatment of injuries common to ranch work. Experience with horses preferred but not essential. The position includes room, board, and fair wages. If these terms are agreeable, you may present yourself at the Broken Wheel Ranch, Iron Valley, before the first snow makes the pass impassable. *R. Thatcher*. Claire touched the scar reflexively, that long, puckered line that ran from her jaw down to her collarbone, disappearing beneath the high collar of her dress. The other letters she'd sent had resulted in polite rejections after meeting her in person. Or worse, the silent turning away of faces that couldn't hide their discomfort. But this R. Thatcher hadn't asked for a photograph, hadn't asked about her appearance or her circumstances, had only asked one question in the postscript *, can you prepare fever remedies and treat wounds that require stitching *. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in her carpet bag alongside her few possessions, 2 dresses, a medical kit inherited from her late husband, a book of psalms she no longer read, and the skills that 8 years of marriage to a doctor had taught her before the fire took him and nearly took her. The boarding house matron, Mrs. Eliza Crane, appeared in the hallway. "Another position, dear." Her eyes held that mixture of pity and relief that Claire had grown accustomed to. Pity for her circumstances, relief that she might soon depart. "Yes, ma'am, a ranch in Iron Valley." "That's rough country, isolated." Mrs. Crane's gaze flickered to Claire's scar, then away. Perhaps you might consider waiting for something in town. The mercantile owner told me customers would find my appearance disturbing," Claire said quietly, "as did the hotel, the school board, and Dr. Morrison, who said patients need comfort. Not," she stopped herself. "Iron Valley will suit me fine." She paid her remaining board with most of her last coins and arranged for a ride with a freight wagon heading north. The driver, a grizzled man named Samuel Hicks, spat tobacco juice and squinted at her. "You the nurse heading to Reed Thatcher's place?" "I am." He loaded her carpet bag without comment, though she caught him staring at her scar when he thought she wasn't looking. "It's a day's ride. Hope you're prepared for what you're getting into." "What do you mean?" "Thatcher's. Well, he ain't much for company since his wife passed. Lives out there with just his girl. Strange little thing. She is. Don't talk." Claire climbed onto the wagon bench. "I'm not looking for conversation, Mr. Hicks. Just honest work." The journey took them through valleys painted gold with autumn grass and beneath peaks already crowned with snow. Hicks talked sporadically about the weather, the price of grain, the wildness of the territory. Claire half listened, her mind on the letter tucked in her bodice. As the sun began its descent behind the mountains, Hicks pointed to a cluster of buildings nestled in a valley where a creek wound like a silver ribbon. "That's the Broken Wheel. Thatcher's got good land here water year-round, natural windbreaks. His horses are some of the finest in the territory." The ranch was larger than Claire had expected, a main house of hewn logs with a stone chimney, a substantial barn, several corrals, and various outbuildings. Everything was well maintained but austere, practical rather than welcoming. "You want me to wait?" Hicks asked as he helped her down. In case it don't work out." Claire straightened her spine. "No, thank you. I'll be staying." He shrugged and handed down her carpet bag. "Suit yourself. I come through every 2 weeks with supplies. You need anything, you let me know." He paused, then added more gently, "Thatcher's a fair man. They say, hard, but fair. Don't expect warmth, but you won't be cheated neither." As the wagon rumbled away, Claire stood in the yard, suddenly aware of her isolation. The wind had picked up, carrying the scent of horses and hay and the faint promise of snow. She pulled her shawl tighter and walked toward the house. She'd barely raised her hand to knock when the door opened. But instead of the man she expected, a small girl stood there, perhaps 7 years old, with wheat-colored hair and 2 neat braids and eyes the color of summer sage. The child studied Claire with an intensity that seemed beyond her years, her gaze lingering on the scar without flinching. Claire knelt slowly, bringing herself to the girl's eye level. "Hello, I'm Miss Claire. You must be—" "Mira." The voice came from behind the child, deep, steady, with an undercurrent of weariness. "Her name is Mira." Claire rose to face Reed Thatcher. He was tall and lean in the way of men who worked hard and ate simple. His face weathered by sun and wind, dark hair touched with premature gray at the temples, eyes the color of winter sky, pale blue and distant. He wore work clothes, his shirt sleeves rolled up despite the chill, revealing forearms marked by the scars and calluses of ranch work. He looked at her directly, his gaze taking in her scar without lingering, without the flinch or false smile she'd grown accustomed to. His expression remained neutral, assessing. "Miss Hartley." "Mr. Thatcher." They stood there for a moment, each taking the measure of the other. Mira remained between them, her small hands folded in front of her pinafore, watching. "Can you stitch a wound?" he asked abruptly. "Yes." "And mix a poultice for infection?" "Yes." "Set a broken bone?" "I've assisted with it. I could do it if necessary." He nodded once. "Your room is upstairs, second door on the right. Board includes 3 meals a day. You'll help with cooking and housework in addition to any medical needs. Washing is done on Mondays. There's a list of remedies we keep on hand. You'll need to check our supplies and tell me what's needed. Questions?" "Wages." $20 a month plus board. More if you prove capable with the horses." It was fair, more than fair for a woman with her appearance. "That's acceptable." "Good." He stepped aside, gesturing for her to enter. "Mira will show you your room. Supper is at 6. The child took Claire's hand without hesitation, her small fingers warm and trusting. As she led Claire through the house, Claire noticed the signs of a home managed by a man alone, functional furniture, bare walls save for a single photograph of a woman with kind eyes. Everything clean but austere. The room Mira showed her to was small but adequate, an iron bedstead with a thick quilt, a washstand, a small wardrobe, and, unexpectedly, a window that looked out over the valley. Someone had placed a jar with dried wildflowers on the windowsill. Mira pointed to the flowers, then to herself, smiling shyly. "They're beautiful." Claire said softly, "Thank you." The child nodded and slipped away, leaving Claire alone. She set her carpet bag on the bed and moved to the window. The sun was setting, painting the valley in shades of gold and purple. Somewhere in the distance, a horse whinnied. She touched her scar again, then deliberately lowered her hand. Thatcher Reed hadn't asked how she got it, hadn't asked why a woman of her age was seeking work alone in the wilderness, had only asked if she could do what was needed. For the first time in 2 years, since the night of the fire that took her husband and marked her forever, Claire Hartley felt something she'd thought lost the possibility of a place where she might simply exist, without explanation or apology. As she unpacked her few belongings, she heard Reed's voice from somewhere below, speaking to his daughter in low, patient tones, not cold, as Hicks had suggested, but careful, the voice of a man who'd learned to guard his words. She understood that. She'd learned to guard everything. The dinner bell rang at 6 precisely. Claire smoothed her hair. adjusted her collar to cover as much of the scar as possible from habit, then made her way downstairs. The kitchen was warm, filled with the scent of stew and fresh bread. Reed stood at the stove while Mira set the table with quiet efficiency. "Sit," Reed said without looking up. "We don't stand on ceremony here." They ate in relative silence, broken only by the clink of spoons against bowls and the pop of wood in the stove. The stew was simple but good venison, root vegetables, herbs Claire couldn't identify. "You'll need supplies," Reed said finally. "Make a list. Hicks will be back in 2 weeks. I'll inventory tomorrow." "Good." He glanced at his daughter. "Mira will help. She knows where things are kept." The child nodded eagerly. "She doesn't speak," Reed said quietly. "Hasn't since her mother died. Doctor in Cheyenne said there's nothing wrong with her voice. She just chooses not to." Claire looked at the little girl, who was watching her father with those sage green eyes. "We all have our ways of managing grief. Mr. Thatcher." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "That we do, Miss Hartley, that we do." The first snow came 3 days after Claire's arrival, falling in fat, lazy flakes that dusted the valley like flour on a baker's board. She stood at the kitchen window, watching Reed work with a young colt in the corral. His movements were patient, deliberate the same careful way he moved through the house, as if afraid of disturbing something fragile. Mira appeared at her elbow, pointing at the snow, then making a gesture Claire had come to understand meant beautiful. In 3 days, they'd developed their own language of signs and touches. The child was quick to learn and eager to communicate, her silence not a barrier, but simply another form of speech. "Yes," Claire agreed, wiping her flour-dusted hands on her apron. "Beautiful and early. We'd better finish the baking before it gets worse." They were making the week's bread a task that, Claire had discovered, had been sadly neglected before her arrival. The kitchen had been functional but sparse, the pantry organized but lacking the touches that made a house feel lived in. Reed hadn't commented when she'd quietly begun adding small improvements, herbs drying by the window, preserves lined up like soldiers on the shelf, a cloth on the table that Mira had helped her hem. The back door opened, bringing a swirl of snow and cold air. Reed entered, stamping his boots on the threshold. Snow clung to his dark hair and the shoulders of his coat. He paused, taking in the scene Claire and Mira at the table, flour in their hair, the kitchen warm and smelling of yeast and comfort. "Storm's coming in faster than expected," he said, hanging his coat on the peg by the door. His eyes lingered on his daughter's flour-smudged face, and something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Might be trapped here for a few days." Claire nodded, already calculating supplies. "We have enough flour and preserved goods. I'll need to check the root cellar, though." "I'll do it." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "The bread smells good." It was the first personal comment he'd made since her arrival. Claire felt oddly flustered. "My mother's recipe. Mira's been helping." Reed's gaze shifted to his daughter, who was shaping dough with intense concentration. "Good," he said quietly. "That's good." He disappeared into the swirling snow before Claire could respond. By evening, the snow had thickened into a proper blizzard. The wind howled around the corners of the house, rattling the windows in their frames. They ate supper venison stew again, but this time with fresh bread while the storm raged outside. The lamplight created a circle of warmth in the kitchen, holding back the dark. "We'll need to check the horses through the night," Reed said, pushing back from the table. "They get anxious in storms like this." "I can help," Claire offered. He looked at her, that direct gaze she was beginning to recognize as his way of measuring truth. "Have you worked with horses before?" "No, but I can learn." "Not in a blizzard. You can't." His tone was firm but not unkind. "I'll handle it. You keep the fire going. If something happens..." He paused, glancing at Mira, who was clearing plates with practiced efficiency. "If something happens, there's a rifle above the mantel. You know how to use it." "My husband taught me." The words came out before she could stop them. It was the first mention she'd made of her past. Reed's expression didn't change. "Good." He pulled on his heavy coat and wrapped a scarf around his face. "I'll knock 3 times when I come back. Don't open the door otherwise." He ventured into the storm, leaving Claire and Mira alone. The child seemed unperturbed by her father's departure. Settling by the fire with a piece of mending, Claire joined her, picking up a shirt that needed buttons. They worked in companionable silence while the storm raged. Every hour, Reed returned, knocked 3 times, and entered covered in snow. He'd warm himself briefly by the fire, report that all was well, then head back out. Claire began heating water for coffee, having it ready for his returns. On his 4th return, near midnight, he was limping slightly. "What happened?" Claire rose immediately, her nurse's instincts overriding any hesitation. "Mare kicked, caught me in the thigh." He lowered himself carefully into a chair. "It's not serious. I'll be the judge of that." The authority in her voice surprised them both. "Mira, bring my medical bag, please." The child scurried upstairs while Claire helped Reed remove his coat. His pants were torn where the horse's hoof had connected, blood seeping through the fabric. "You'll need to—" He gestured vaguely at his pants. "I was married to a doctor for 8 years. Mr. Thatcher, I've seen worse." She kept her tone professional, though she noticed the flush that crept up his neck. When Mira returned with the bag, Claire sent her to heat water. The wound, once revealed, was indeed not serious, a deep bruise with a small laceration, but left untended in this weather, infection was always a risk. She cleaned the wound with practiced efficiency, aware of Reed watching her work. His jaw was tight, though whether from pain or discomfort at the intimacy of the situation, she couldn't tell. "You've done this before," he observed. "Many times. My husband ran a clinic in Denver. I assisted him." She applied a poultice of comfrey and calendula. "Before the fire?" The words hung between them. She hadn't meant to say that last part. Reed was quiet for a long moment. Then, house fire. "Clinic fire. A lamp got knocked over during—" She paused, focusing on wrapping the bandage. "During an altercation, my husband was trying to stop a man from stealing medicines." "And you were there?" "Yes." She tied off the bandage, not looking at him. "Hold still. This will sting." She applied the antiseptic, and he drew in a sharp breath but didn't pull away. When she finally looked up, he was watching her with those pale blue eyes, seeing too much. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "It was 2 years ago." She began packing away her supplies. "The scar makes it difficult to find work. People find it disturbing. People are fools." The blunt statement surprised a small laugh out of her. "Perhaps, but foolish people still pay wages." "Not here." He stood carefully, testing his weight on the injured leg. "Here, you're judged on your work. Nothing else." Mira appeared with coffee, which Reed accepted gratefully. He drained the cup, then looked at his daughter. "Bed, little bird. I'll be in to say good night soon." The child nodded, hugged him carefully around the waist, then surprised Claire by hugging her too before disappearing upstairs. "She's taken to you," Reed said quietly. "She's a sweet child." "She is." He set down the coffee cup. "Her mother was too gentle. Nothing prepared her for how hard this life would be." Claire sensed he was offering something in exchange of difficult truths. Perhaps. "How did she die?" "Pneumonia. 4 winters ago. Doctor couldn't make it through the snow in time." His voice was steady, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the back of the chair. "Mira was only 3. She called for her mother for months afterward. Then one day, she just stopped. Hasn't spoken since. Grief takes many forms." Yes. He looked at her directly. Sometimes it leaves scars you can see. Sometimes it doesn't. The wind howled louder, rattling the windows. Reed glanced toward the door. I should check the horses once more. Your leg? We'll be fine, thanks to you. He pulled on his coat. Get some rest. Tomorrow will be long if the storm continues. After he left, Claire banked the fire and climbed the stairs to her room. From her window, she could see the faint glow of his lantern moving toward the barn, a small point of light in the swirling darkness. She touched her scar absently, thinking about his words. Asterisk. Sometimes it leaves scars you can see, sometimes it doesn't. In bed, she lay awake listening to the storm and the occasional sound of Reed's footsteps on the porch below. 3 knocks, the door opening and closing, the quiet movements of a man keeping watch over what was his. She thought about Mira's trusting hugs, about flour-dusted hands and fresh bread, about the way Reed had said people are fools, as if it were simple fact. For the first time since the fire, the scar didn't throb with phantom pain as she fell asleep. The blizzard lasted 2 more days. By the time it cleared, leaving the valley transformed under a thick blanket of white. Something had shifted in the house. Claire found herself anticipating Reed's quiet returns from the barn, having coffee ready without being asked. Mira shadowed her constantly, eager to learn whatever Claire would teach, and Reed, while still reserved, no longer seemed to deliberately maintain distance. On the 3rd morning, as Claire served breakfast, he said quietly, Thank you for the coffee, for, he gestured vaguely, encompassing everything and nothing. Just thank you. Claire nodded, understanding. Some things didn't need words. Some silences were their own form of shelter. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds, setting the snow-covered valley ablaze with light. It would be hard work digging out, tending to horses made restless by confinement, checking for damage. But for now, in the warm kitchen with coffee and bread and quiet companionship, the work could wait. Mira tugged at Claire's sleeve, pointing to the window where icicles hung like nature's chandelier. The child's face was bright with wonder. No words needed to express her joy. Yes, Claire said softly, her hand briefly touching the child's hair. Beautiful. From across the table, Reed watched them, and for the first time since her arrival, Claire saw something that might have been peace settle across his weathered features. November settled over the valley like a patient grandmother, bringing shorter days and longer evenings by the fire. Claire had been at the Broken Wheel Ranch for 6 weeks now, and the rhythms of the place had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. Morning chores with the horses, teaching Mira her letters through finger writing and flour, preparing remedies for the various ailments that plagued both man and beast as winter deepened. She'd discovered that Reed Thatcher was a man of subtle kindnesses. He never spoke of them, never drew attention to his actions, but Claire noticed. The extra wood stacked by the kitchen door so she wouldn't have to venture to the woodpile in the cold. The new books that appeared on the shelf, medical texts and novels when Samuel Hicks made his supply runs. The way he'd fixed the drafty window in her room without mentioning it. One evening, as she sat mending by the fire with Mira practicing her needlework beside her, Reed entered from the barn carrying something wrapped in burlap. Found this in Hicks's wagon, he said, setting it on the table. Thought you might have use for it. Claire unwrapped the bundle to find a heavy wool shawl, the color of wine, soft as lamb's wool. Her breath caught. It was far too fine for a simple housekeeper's wages to afford. Mr. Thatcher, I can't— It's practical, he interrupted, his voice gruff. That old thing you wear is too thin for Wyoming winters. Can't have you catching pneumonia. Mira jumped up, running her small hands over the soft wool, then looked between her father and Claire with bright, knowing eyes. She made a gesture Claire had learned meant pretty, then pointed at Claire. Thank you, Claire said quietly. Understanding this was not something to make a fuss over. It's very practical. Reed nodded once and retreated to his study. But Claire caught the pleased look that flickered across his face when she wore the shawl to breakfast the next morning. The days took on a comfortable pattern. While Reed worked with the horses or mended fences, Claire managed the household and saw to the medical needs that arose. A ranch hand's cut finger, a horse's infected hoof, Mira's winter cough, all tended with quiet efficiency. It was the evenings Claire treasured most. After supper, they would gather in the parlor, a room that had clearly seen little use before her arrival. Reed would work on his account books while Claire taught Mira to read using gestures and written words. The child was quick, eager, absorbing everything like drought-parched earth drinks rain. One such evening, Mira presented Claire with a slate on which she'd written in careful letters, "Why don't you smile?" Claire felt Reed's attention shift from his ledgers, though he didn't look up. She considered her answer carefully. "I do smile," she said gently. "When you show me your drawings, when your father tells his stories about the horses, when the bread rises just right." Mira shook her head, pointing to her mouth, then gesturing broadly, the kind of smile she meant, the kind that transformed a whole face. Claire touched her scar unconsciously. "Sometimes, when something hurts for a long time, we forget how to show our happiness the way we used to, but that doesn't mean we don't feel it." The child considered this, then wrote, "Does it still hurt?" "Not the way it used to," Claire answered honestly. Mira stood and, with the directness of children, kissed Claire's scarred cheek before heading up to bed. Claire sat frozen, her hand rising to touch where the child's lips had been. "She's never done that before," Reed said quietly. "Not since her mother." Claire blinked back sudden tears. "She's a special child." "Yes." He closed his ledger, studying her across the room. "You're good for her, for—" He stopped, stood abruptly. "I should check the horses." But he paused at the door, not looking back. "You do, smile. Maybe not the way you used to, but you do." The next morning brought a crisis. One of Reed's prize mares, heavy with foal, went into early labor. Claire found Reed in the barn at dawn, his face grim. "Too early," he said. "2 months too early. I've lost both mare and foal with timing like this." "What can I do?" He looked at her, surprised. "This isn't women's work." "Neither is stitching up men who come in half dead from gunfights, but I did that for 8 years. She rolled up her sleeves. "Tell me what you need." For the next 6 hours, they worked together. Claire had assisted with human births, but this was different, the mare's pain visible in her rolling eyes and heaving sides. Reed's tension palpable as he tried to turn the foal. Claire kept the mare calm, speaking in low, soothing tones while preparing the supplies Reed called for. When the foal finally came tiny, too tiny it wasn't breathing, Reed's shoulders sagged. "No," Claire said firmly. She dropped to her knees beside the small body, clearing its airways as she'd seen her husband do with infants. She rubbed its chest vigorously, breathed into its nostrils, ignored Reed's gentle hand on her shoulder. "Claire—" "No." She kept working, remembering another life that had slipped away while she stood helpless. "Not this time." And then a shudder, a weak, mewling cry. The foal's eyes opened. Reed swore softly, a prayer more than a curse. His hands joined hers, helping the foal to its mother. The mare, exhausted but alert, began cleaning her baby with tender efficiency. They sat back on the hay, watching mother and child, both breathing hard. Claire realized Reed's hand was covering hers where it rested on the straw. She didn't pull away. "You saved them," he said roughly. "We saved them." He turned to look at her then, and something in his expression made her heart skip. "I'm beginning to think you could save just about anything." Claire Hartley. The use of her first name hung between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Before either could speak, Mira appeared in the barn doorway, having woken to find the house empty. Her eyes went wide at the sight of the foal, and she clapped her hands in silent delight. "Come meet the newest addition," Reed said, his hand leaving Claire's to gesture his daughter forward. "Gently now," as Mira knelt beside the foal with wonder-struck eyes. Reed stood and offered Claire his hand up. She took it, noting the calluses, the strength, the careful way he released her once she was steady. That evening, as Claire prepared supper, she found herself humming something she hadn't done since before the fire. Mira noticed, pointing it out with excited gestures. Even Reed seemed lighter, recounting the birth to his ranch hands with something approaching enthusiasm. After Mira had gone to bed, Claire found Reed on the porch despite the cold, watching the stars. She joined him, wrapped in her new shawl. "Thank you," he said without preamble. "For today, for—" he gestured helplessly. "For bringing life back to this place. I haven't done anything except what I was hired to do." "No." His voice was firm. "You've done much more than that." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, "When Margaret died, I thought Mira and I would just exist here, get through the days. I didn't expect—" "Didn't expect what?" He turned to look at her, starlight catching in his pale eyes. "To see my daughter laugh again, even silently. To look forward to coming in from the barn. To feel like this is a home again, not just a house." Claire's throat tightened. "Mr. Thatcher." "Reed," he corrected softly. "I think we're past formalities. Don't you?" "Reed." The name felt strange and right on her tongue. "I should tell you, I'm not who I was before. The fire, what happened, it changed me. I may never be the kind of woman who—" "Who what? Who smiles the way she used to? Who trusts easily? Who doesn't carry scars?" He shook his head. "I'm not asking you to be who you were. Claire, none of us can go back to that." She pulled the shawl tighter, feeling exposed despite the warm wool. "What are you asking?" "Nothing, not yet. Just stay. Be here. Keep bringing whatever it is you bring that makes my daughter kiss your cheek and makes this ranch feel like something more than a place to wait for spring." He paused. "Can you do that?" Claire looked out at the star-scattered sky, then at the man beside her, weathered, careful, kind in ways he tried to hide. "Yes," she said simply. "I can do that." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching their breath cloud in the cold air. From the barn came the soft sound of the mare nickering to her foal. From the house, the warm glow of lamplight spilled from windows onto snow. "You should go in," Reed said finally. "It's cold." In a moment, Claire surprised herself by adding, "This is nice. The quiet, the stars, the—" She gestured between them. "This?" "Yes," he agreed quietly. "It is." When she finally went inside, she paused at the door. "Reed, the foal needs a name." A smile rare and transforming crossed his face. "Let Mira choose. It was her mother's tradition." "All right." Claire smiled back, not the bright, careless smile of her youth, but something quieter, truer. "Good night." "Good night, Claire." Inside, she hung her shawl carefully on the peg by the door and banked the fire for the night. Through the window, she could see Reed still standing on the porch, a solid shadow against the starlight. For the first time in 2 years, Claire Hartley went to bed without touching her scar, without remembering flame and loss and the bitter taste of smoke. Instead, she thought of a tiny foal taking its first breath, of a silent child's kiss, of a man who offered shelter without conditions. She thought of home. The December blizzard arrived with a vengeance, howling down from the mountains like a living thing. The temperature plummeted so fast that ice formed on the inside of the windows, and the wind drove snow through every tiny gap in the walls. Claire woke in the deep of night to the sound of horses screaming. She dressed quickly, her fingers numb with cold despite the wool stockings and flannel nightgown. Downstairs, she found Reed already pulling on his boots, his face grim in the lamplight. "Starlight's foaling," he said tersely. "The one we saved last month, her mother. She's in trouble." Claire grabbed her medical bag without hesitation. "What do you need?" "Another pair of hands? Maybe a miracle." He paused at the door. "It's dangerous out there. The wind could knock you down. And if you get lost between here and the barn, then we'd better stay together." She wrapped her shawl around her head and shoulders. "Lead the way." The journey to the barn, normally a minute's walk, became a battle. The wind hit like physical blows, driving snow into their faces with stinging force. Reed kept one arm around Claire's shoulders, guiding her through the white blindness. Twice she stumbled, and both times his grip tightened, holding her steady. Inside the barn, the relative quiet was shocking. The mare lay on her side in the stall, sides heaving, eyes rolling white with pain. The foal they'd saved weeks earlier huddled in the corner, trembling. "She's been at it too long," Reed said, kneeling beside the mare. "The foal's turned wrong." They worked through the night, Claire holding the lantern and passing supplies while Reed fought to save both mother and baby. His hands, always so careful, moved with desperate efficiency. When the mare's struggles grew weaker, Claire found herself praying something she hadn't done since the fire. "There," Reed breathed suddenly. "I've got it turned." The foal came in a rush, another female. Dark as her mother was light, but like her sibling, she wasn't breathing. This time, Claire didn't hesitate. She cleared the foal's airways and began the same process that had worked before, aware of Reed working frantically to stop the mare's bleeding. "Come on," she whispered to the tiny form. "Come on, little one. Your mother needs you to fight." Behind her, she heard Reed's sharp intake of breath, felt rather than saw him go still. She knew without looking that they were losing the mare. "Save the foal," he said roughly. "Just save the foal." Claire redoubled her efforts, breathing for the baby, massaging its chest. Time stretched, measured in heartbeats and desperate hope. Then a gasp, a weak whinny. The foal's eyes opened. "Thank God," Reed breathed. But when Claire turned, she saw the mare had gone still, her brave heart finally quiet. Reed's face was stone, but his hands were gentle as he closed the mare's eyes. "She was my wife's favorite," he said quietly. "Starlight, because of the white mark on her forehead." Claire settled the orphaned foal against its sibling, hoping the maternal instinct would cross bloodlines. To her relief, the older foal's mother accepted the baby, allowing it to nurse alongside her own. "She'll raise both," Claire said softly. "It happens sometimes." Reed nodded, still kneeling by Starlight's still form. Without thinking, Claire placed her hand on his shoulder. He reached up, covering her hand with his own, both of them bloody from their work, both trembling from exhaustion and grief. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "She went bringing life into the world," he said. "It's how she would have wanted it." He stood slowly, favoring his bad leg in the cold. "We should get back. Mira will wake soon." But when they opened the barn door, the storm had worsened. The house, only yards away, was invisible in the driving snow. "We can't risk it," Reed decided. "We'll have to wait it out here." They made a makeshift shelter in the tack room, spreading horse blankets on the hay. Reed started a small fire in the iron stove used for heating water. As warmth slowly crept into the space, exhaustion hit them both. Claire found herself sitting beside Reed on the hay, shoulders touching, sharing warmth and silence. The lamp burned low, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Tell me about your wife," Claire said quietly. "If you want to." Reed was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, Margaret was sunlight, always laughing, always seeing the good in things. She made this place beautiful just by being in it. He paused. She wasn't made for this life, though, the isolation, the hardship. She tried. God knows she tried. But each winter took more from her. The last one took everything. Yes. He turned to look at her. Tell me about your husband. Claire pulled the blanket tighter. Thomas was a good man, a dedicated doctor. She struggled for words. He saved everyone but himself. The night of the fire. He went back for the medical supplies. The man who'd started it a drunk, angry about a bill he blocked the door. Didn't mean to, probably, but by the time I got out through the window. The scar. She nodded. Glass and flame. The neighbors pulled me back when I tried to go after him. Her hand rose unconsciously to her neck. Sometimes I still feel the heat. Reed's hand covered hers, drawing it away from the scar. No fire here, he said softly. Just snow and cold and... He paused. And whatever this is... What is this? The question slipped out before she could stop it. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. I don't know, but for the first time in 4 years, I want to find out. The wind howled around the barn, but inside their small circle of warmth, something shifted. Claire turned her hand palm up, interlacing her fingers with his. They sat that way, connected by touch and understanding, until the lamp burned low. She must have dozed, because she woke to find her head on Reed's shoulder, his arm around her. The storm had quieted to a whisper. Through the small window, she could see the faint light of dawn. The house, she said, sitting up quickly. Mira, he agreed, but he didn't immediately move. Claire, Whatever he might have said was lost as the barn door burst open. Young Tom Henley, one of the ranch hands, stumbled in. Boss, thank God. We thought Miss Mira's been up all night. Worried sick, she wouldn't let us come look until the storm died down. They made their way back to the house to find Mira at the kitchen window, her small face pressed to the glass. When she saw them, she flew to the door, throwing herself at her father, then at Claire, tears streaming down her face. Reed knelt, gathering his daughter close. We're all right, little bird. We were just waiting out the storm. Mira pulled back, her hands moving frantically in signs Claire couldn't follow. Reed's face softened. Yes, we saved the foal. But Starlight... He shook his head. The child's face crumpled. She'd loved the mare too. But then she straightened, wiping her tears with small fists. She went to Claire, took her hand, and led her to the kitchen table. There, spread across the surface, was a drawing. It showed 3 figures standing together under a night sky, a tall man, a woman with dark hair, and a small girl between them. Above them, stars spelled out a word. Home. Claire's throat tightened. It's beautiful. Mira. The child pointed to each figure, then to the people in the room, making sure Claire understood. This was them. This was how she saw them. Together. We should clean up, Reed said gruffly, but Claire saw the emotion he was trying to hide. And someone needs to tend those foals. As Claire headed upstairs to change, she heard Tom Henley talking quietly to Reed. Thought we'd lost you both in that storm, boss. Never seen Miss Mira so scared. We're fine, Tom. Yes, sir. And if I may say, it's good to see you looking after someone again. And someone looking after you. Claire paused on the stairs, her hand on the banister. Through the window, she could see the barn where Starlight lay, where new life nursed beside the old, where she and Reed had sheltered through the storm. She thought about the drawing downstairs home written in stars, about Reed's thumb across her knuckles, about Mira's tears of relief. For the first time, she understood that rescue came in many forms. Sometimes it was dramatic breathing life into the stillborn, pulling someone from flames. But sometimes it was quieter, a hand held in darkness, a drawing left on a table, a shawl given against the cold. Sometimes rescue was simply staying, simply being there when the storm passed. She changed clothes and returned downstairs to find Reed and Mira waiting for her. Without discussion, they bundled up and went together to tend the orphaned foal. As they walked through the snow, Mira between them, each holding one of her hands. Claire felt something settle into place. Not healing that would take more time. Not forgetting some things carved themselves too deep for that. But something else. Something that felt like the first day of spring after an endless winter. Something that felt like beginning. The whispers started during the January thaw, when the roads cleared enough for folks to travel between the scattered ranches and into town. Claire first heard them at Morrison's general store, where she'd gone to purchase fabric for new curtains Reed had given her money to brighten the place up however you see fit. She was examining a bolt of blue calico when she heard Mrs. Adelaide Morrison speaking to another customer behind the flour barrels. Living right there in the house with him, bold as brass, and him a widower with a young daughter to think of. "I heard she's marked," the other woman replied. "Scarred something terrible. Probably grateful for any position, if you take my meaning." Claire's hands stilled on the fabric. She'd known this would come eventually. Small communities thrived on gossip, and a single woman living with a widower was prime fodder for speculation. "That poor little girl, Mrs. Morrison continued. Already lost her mother, and now exposed to, well, who knows what kind of influence." Claire set down the fabric and walked directly to the counter. "Mrs. Morrison, I'll take 5 yards of the blue calico and 2 of the yellow muslin, please." The woman had the grace to flush, but her chin lifted defiantly. "Miss Hartley, we were just discussing the weather. It has been uncommonly mild for January." Claire's tone was pleasant but firm. "Though I suspect we'll see more snow before spring." She paid for her purchases and left with her head high, but the words followed her home like shadows. That evening, she was quieter than usual at supper, pushing food around her plate while Mira showed her father the letters she'd been practicing. "What is it?" Reed asked after Mira had gone to bed. They'd fallen into the habit of sharing tea by the fire after the child was asleep, talking over the day's events. "Nothing of consequence." He studied her with those penetrating blue eyes. "You're a poor liar. Claire Hartley." She set down her teacup with more force than necessary. "Do you know what they're saying in town about us? About—" She gestured helplessly between them. "I can guess." His voice was calm. "Does it matter?" "Of course it matters, your reputation. Mira's future. My reputation." He laughed, though there was no humor in it. "I'm Reed Thatcher, the man who let his wife die of pneumonia because he couldn't get through a snowstorm in time. The man who hasn't set foot in church since her funeral. The man whose daughter won't speak. You think your presence here could damage my reputation further?" "That's different." "Is it?" He leaned forward. "Claire, people will talk regardless. They talked when I hired you sight unseen. They talked when I didn't remarry within 6 months of Margaret's death like they expected. They'll talk until something more interesting comes along. And if it doesn't, if they decide that we're—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Reed was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and went to his desk, returning with a folded paper. "This came yesterday. I wasn't sure whether to show you." Claire unfolded it to find an advertisement cut from a newspaper. "Matrimonial agency, respectable widowers seeking capable wives for Western territories. Guaranteed propriety and Christian values." "Mrs. Morrison gave it to Tom Henley to pass along to me." Reed explained, her way of expressing her concern for my situation. Claire stared at the paper. "Are you considering it?" "Am I considering sending away the only person who's made this house feel alive again to satisfy the gossips?" He took the paper and tossed it into the fire. "No, Claire, I'm not—" The certainty in his voice made her eyes burn. "But if I'm causing problems—" "The only problem," he said quietly, "is that I can't offer you more than employment without making the situation worse. And that's not fair to you." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Claire found herself unable to look away from his face, from the mixture of frustration and something deeper in his eyes. "Reed, A knock at the door interrupted whatever she might have said. Reed frowned. Visitors after dark were rare and rarely brought good news. He opened the door to find Samuel Hicks standing there, hat in hand. "Sorry to disturb, Mr. Thatcher, but I thought you should know. There's been talk in town about sending the church ladies out here to assess the situation. Mrs. Morrison's leading the charge." Reed's jaw tightened. "Let them come." "Reed," Hicks said carefully, "I've known you since you first came to this valley. You're a good man, and Miss Claire seems a fine woman, but sometimes being right don't matter as much as being careful." After Hicks left, Reed stood at the window, staring out at the dark. Claire joined him, not touching but close enough to feel his warmth. "I won't have you driven away by busybodies," he said fiercely. "And I won't have Mira hurt by gossip about her father and the hired help." "You're not," he stopped, running a hand through his hair. "You're not just hired help. Not anymore. You must know that." "What am I then?" He turned to face her fully. "I don't know. I just know that when I come in from the barn, I look for you. When Mira laughs silently, but still laughs, I want to share it with you. When I think about spring coming, I picture you here to see it." Claire's breath caught. "Reed, we can't." "I know." His voice was rough. "I know all the reasons why not. But I also know that for the first time since Margaret died, I want someone. The next morning brought exactly what Hicks had warned about. A delegation of 3 women from town arrived just after breakfast, led by Adelaide Morrison. Claire saw them coming up the drive and felt her stomach clench. "I'll make myself scarce," she told Reed. "You'll do no such thing. This is your home." He caught himself. "This is where you work and live. You have every right to be here." When the women entered, Claire was calmly mending one of Mira's dresses while the child practiced writing at the table. Reed had positioned himself at his desk, the picture of propriety. "Ladies," he greeted them coolly. "To what do we owe the pleasure?" "Mrs." Morrison's sharp eyes took in every detail of the domestic scene. "We've come to see how dear little Mira is faring. Such a tragedy, losing her mother so young. As you can see, she's well." Reed's tone could have frosted windows. "And continuing her education. How wonderful," one of the other women said, peering at Mira's slate. "Though perhaps she would benefit from proper schooling in town." "My daughter receives excellent instruction here." Reed's voice carried a warning. "Mrs." Morrison turned her attention to Claire. "And you, Miss Hartley, such a brave choice, taking a position so far from civilization, though I suppose options are limited when one is marked by tragedy." Claire set aside her mending with deliberate calm. "I find the valley quite civilized, Mrs. Morrison. We have books, music, education, and meaningful work. What more does one need?" "A proper moral environment, for one," the woman replied pointedly. Before Reed could respond, Mira suddenly stood and walked to Claire's side. The child took Claire's hand and placed it over her own heart, then pointed to herself and made the sign for safe. Then she turned to the women and made another gesture, one Claire hadn't seen before, but whose meaning was clear: go away. "Mira," Reed said gently, but there was pride in his voice. The child shook her head fiercely. She pulled Claire's arm around her shoulders and glared at the visitors with all the ferocity her 7 years could muster. "Well, Mrs." Morrison huffed, "I can see the child has formed an attachment." "Yes," Reed said, standing. "She has, as have I. Claire Hartley has brought nothing but good to this household. She's skilled, kind, and has helped my daughter more than anyone else has managed since her mother's death. If you've come here hoping to find impropriety, you'll be disappointed." Mr. Thatcher." Adelaide Morrison drew herself up. "Surely you must see how this appears. I see a woman who was burned trying to save her husband being gossiped about by people who've never faced real hardship." Reed said quietly but firmly, I see a child who lost her voice finding new ways to communicate because someone took the time to understand her. And I see neighbors who should have better things to do than manufacture scandal where none exists." The women left shortly after, backs rigid with indignation. As their carriage rolled away, Claire sank into a chair. "That was foolish," she said. "You've made enemies." "I've told the truth." Reed knelt beside Mira, who had tears in her eyes. "You did well, little bird. Standing up for what's right isn't always easy." Mira hugged him, then Claire, then ran upstairs. Claire could hear her footsteps overhead. Probably retrieving her drawing materials, the child processed everything through art. "They won't stop," Claire said quietly. "It will get worse now. Then we'll face it together." He paused. Unless you want to leave, I wouldn't blame you." Claire thought about the whispers in town, the pointed looks, the suggestions that she was somehow improper for simply existing in this space. Then she thought about Mira's fierce protection, Reed's quiet defense, the way this house had become more home than any place she'd lived. "No," she said firmly. "I'm not leaving. Let them talk." That night, Mira presented them with a new drawing. It showed the three of them standing together, backs straight, facing a group of frowning figures. Above their heads, she'd written in careful letters, "Family stands together." Claire's eyes burned as she hugged the child. Over Mira's head, she met Reed's gaze. "Family," he said quietly, testing the word. It was a promise, a possibility, a problem, and a prayer all at once. But as Claire held Mira and felt Reed's steady presence beside them, she knew it was also the truth, no matter what the town gossips might say. The fever came upon Claire suddenly on a bitter February night. She'd felt tired at supper, but attributed it to the long day spent helping Tom Henley treat a horse with colic. By midnight, she was burning with heat, tossing in delirium, her nightgown soaked with sweat. Reed found her when he came to investigate why the morning kitchen fire hadn't been started. Claire was curled on her side, shaking violently despite the heavy quilts, muttering words he couldn't understand. "Claire?" He touched her forehead and jerked back at the heat. Without hesitation, he lifted her from the bed, blankets and all, and carried her downstairs to the parlor where he could tend the fire more easily. Mira appeared in the doorway, eyes wide with fear. She'd seen illness take her mother the fever, the struggle for breath, the terrible stillness that followed. "She'll be all right," Reed told his daughter, though fear clawed at his own chest. "Go fetch the medical bag from the kitchen. You know which one." For the next 3 days, Reed barely left Claire's side. He bathed her face with cool cloths, spooned willow bark tea between her cracked lips, changed sweat-soaked bedding. When she thrashed in delirium, he held her hands to keep her from hurting herself. When she called for Thomas, her dead husband, he swallowed his jealousy and spoke soothing words. On the second night, as the fever raged highest, Claire's delirium took a darker turn. "No, please," she moaned, her hands clawing at invisible flames. "The door! He locked the door! Thomas, the smoke! I can't breathe!" Reed's blood ran cold as he pieced together what she was reliving. He caught her hands gently. "You're safe, Claire. There's no fire. You got out." "My fault," she gasped. "Should have stopped him. Should have known he'd been drinking. The money. He owed so much money." "Shh," Reed soothed, but she kept talking, the fever loosening truths she'd never spoken aloud. "Thomas locked it. Locked me in to face him alone. Said if I was a better wife, he wouldn't need to drink. Wouldn't owe money. The lamp broke. Flames everywhere. The window. Had to break the window." Reed's hands tightened involuntarily. Her husband had locked her in during a fire. "Got out?" Claire mumbled. "But went back. Fool. Went back for him. Always went back." Her hand rose to her throat, fingers tracing the scar. "Should have let him burn. Wrong to think it. But sometimes I wish..." No, Reed said firmly. You survived. You're here now. You're safe. Mira crept in with fresh water and clean cloths. She'd been helping however she could, keeping the fire fed, bringing supplies, sitting quietly beside Claire when Reed had to tend the absolute necessities of the ranch. Now she climbed carefully onto the settee and placed her small hand on Claire's arm. The touch seemed to calm Claire. Her restless movements stilled, though the fever still burned. Mira looked up at her father with those solemn green eyes and made a sign he recognized, sing. I don't sing, little bird, you know that. But Mira was insistent, pointing to Claire, then making the sign again. Reed cleared his throat, feeling foolish. He hadn't sung since Margaret died. She'd been the one with the voice, always filling the house with melody. But looking at his daughter's pleading face and Claire's fevered form, he began the only song he could think of, an old hymn his mother had sung when he was ill as a child. His voice was rough with disuse, barely above a whisper, but Mira smiled and settled against his side. Claire's breathing seemed to ease. They kept vigil through the night. When dawn broke on the third day, Claire's fever finally broke with it. She opened clear eyes to find Reed asleep in the chair beside her. Mira curled against him, both of them still in yesterday's clothes. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it, a soft groan escaping. Reed startled awake instantly. Claire, his eyes searched her face. How do you feel? Like I've been trampled by horses. Her voice was hoarse. How long? 3 days. He helped her sit up, supporting her carefully. You had us worried. Memory flickered across her face, fragments of fever dreams and things said. What did I say? Reed was quiet for a moment. Nothing that matters now. You're safe. That's what counts. But Claire saw the knowledge in his eyes. I told you about the fire, about Thomas. The fever told me you don't have to. He was a good man once. The words came slowly, painfully. But the war changed him. He came back haunted, started drinking to forget things he'd seen, gambling to feel alive. By the end, I didn't recognize the man I'd married. You don't have to tell me this. I want to. She accepted the water he offered, gathering strength. That night, a patient came seeking help. Drunk, angry about a bill Thomas had sent, they argued. Thomas had been drinking too, they both had. The lamp got knocked over in the struggle. Thomas, he shoved me in the storage room and locked it. Said to stay out of men's business. Reed's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The fire spread so fast. I broke the window to get out. That's how. She touched her scar. But I went back, tried to get to him. The neighbors pulled me away. But by then, she closed her eyes. Everyone said I was a hero for trying to save him. But Reed, sometimes I wonder if I went back out of love or duty. And sometimes, God forgive me, I'm not sure I know the difference anymore. Reed took her hand carefully. You went back. That's what matters. Whatever you felt, whatever he'd done, you didn't let him face it alone. Mira's mother, Claire said suddenly. Was she happy? The change of subject surprised him, but he followed her lead. Yes, even when things were hard, Margaret found joy. She loved this valley, loved the horses, loved. His voice roughened. She loved completely, without reservation. I used to worry it would break her, feeling everything so deeply. And it did. No. He was quiet for a long moment. The pneumonia broke her body, but her spirit, that stayed whole until the end. She died telling me to find happiness again, to give Mira a mother who could teach her to be strong. He laughed bitterly. I told her I didn't want anyone else. She said that was fine for now, but someday someone would walk through that door who'd make me want to live again, not just survive. Claire squeezed his hand weakly. She sounds wise. She was about everything except her own limits. He helped Claire lie back against the pillows. Rest now. Real rest. Not fever dreams. But Claire caught his sleeve as he stood. "Reed, thank you for staying, for," she gestured helplessly, "for seeing me through the worst of it without judgment." "No thanks needed." He tucked the blanket around her carefully. "Though if you ever scare us like that again, I might lock you in the storage room myself." The weak joke surprised a laugh out of her, which turned into a cough. Reed immediately fetched honey tea, supporting her while she drank. Over the next week, Claire recovered slowly. Reed insisted she rest, taking over her duties with surprising competence. She discovered he could cook more than just basic stew, could braid Mira's hair, though not as neatly as Claire, and even attempted to continue the reading lessons, though his patience wasn't quite equal to the task. One afternoon, she woke from a nap to find a note on her bedside table in Reed's careful script. "Claire, I'm no good with words spoken aloud, but some things need saying. You spoke of not knowing the difference between love and duty. I understand that. I felt duty to Margaret's memory for so long, I forgot what it was to want something for myself. Then you arrived, and suddenly I remembered, not because you replaced her, but because you reminded me that the heart isn't meant to be a tomb. Thank you for that, for showing Mira and me that life goes on. Different, but still good. Rest well. We need you. A.R." Claire pressed the note to her chest, tears sliding down her cheeks. When Mira peeked in later with a tray of soup, she found Claire sitting up, looking more at peace than she had since the fever. That evening, Claire insisted on coming downstairs for supper. She was still weak, moving carefully, but determined to rejoin the life of the household. Reed had made chicken and dumplings, Margaret's recipe. He admitted, and Mira had set the table with their best dishes. As they ate, Claire noticed a new drawing posted on the wall Mira's work, showing 3 figures around a table, with words carefully lettered above, "Family eats together again." "It's perfect," Claire told the child, who beamed. Later, as Reed helped her back to the parlor, Claire asked quietly, "Did you mean it what you wrote?" He settled her on the settee, then sat beside her closer than propriety might suggest, but not quite touching. "Every word." "I don't know if I can be what you need," she admitted. "The fire, Thomas, everything that happened. It changed me. I'm not sure I know how to trust that completely anymore." "I'm not asking you to." His voice was steady. "Certain. I'm just asking you to stay, to let us figure out the rest as we go." Claire looked at him, this careful, kind man who'd stayed by her side through fever and delirium, who'd heard her worst truths and hadn't turned away. "I can do that." Mira appeared with her slate, showing them a new word she'd learned to write, hope. "Yes," Claire said softly, drawing the child close. "That's exactly the right word." Outside, February's bitter wind rattled the windows, but inside, the fire burned warm and steady. 3 souls who'd known loss sat together, not yet healed but healing, not yet whole but no longer broken. It was, Claire thought, more than enough. It was everything. The March storm struck without warning, turning the afternoon sky black as night. Claire had just finished the washing when the temperature plummeted and the first snowflakes began to fall, not the lazy drift of winter's end, but hard, driving pellets of ice and snow. Reed burst through the door, covered in white. "Blizzard coming fast. Need to secure everything." They worked in practiced synchronization now, months of shared labor creating an unspoken understanding. Claire helped drive the horses into the barn, while Reed checked feed supplies. Mira, growing braver and more helpful each day, carried extra water buckets without being asked. By nightfall, the world outside had vanished into a wall of white. The wind shrieked like a living thing, battering the house with frozen fists. They gathered in the kitchen, the warmest room, and prepared for a long siege. "Could last days," Reed said, stoking the fire higher. "We've supplies enough, but—" A crash from above cut him off. Wind had blown out an upstairs window. Reed headed for the stairs, but Claire caught his arm. Your leg still troubles you in the cold. I'll go.
Claire, I'm not an invalid anymore. Reed, let me help.
He nodded reluctantly. Claire climbed to the second floor, gasping as the cold hit her like a physical blow. Snow was already piling on the floor beneath the broken window. She grabbed blankets from the linen closet and struggled to cover the opening, the wind fighting her every move. As she wrestled with the last corner, a particularly vicious gust tore the blanket from her hands. She lunged for it, slipped on the wet floor, and fell hard against the windowsill. Pain flared along her ribs, but she managed to secure the covering. When she returned downstairs, Reed took one look at her hair wild, dress soaked, holding her side and moved toward her.
I'm fine,
she said quickly, but winced as she sat. You're hurt. It wasn't a question. His hands were already gently probing her ribs, checking for breaks with surprising expertise. Bruised, not broken. She diagnosed herself. I've had worse. That doesn't make it better. His touch lingered a moment longer than necessary before he stepped back. Mira, fetch the medical supplies. As Claire changed into dry clothes, she heard Reed moving furniture, creating a makeshift sleeping area in the parlor. We'll stay down here tonight, he explained when she returned. Easier to keep warm. They made pallets on the floor near the fire, Reed on one side, Claire on the other, Mira safely between them. But the child was restless, frightened by the storm's violence. She kept sitting up, eyes wide, flinching at each howl of wind. Finally, Claire began telling a story, something she'd started doing on quiet evenings. Once, there was a princess who lived in a castle made entirely of glass. Mira settled against her, and Claire felt Reed's attention too, though he pretended to tend the fire. She wove a tale of courage and kindness, of storms weathered and love found, until Mira's breathing deepened into sleep. You have a gift, Reed said quietly. My mother told me stories. It's one of the few things I remember clearly about her. They lay in comfortable silence, listening to the storm rage. The firelight painted moving shadows on the walls, creating a small world separate from the violence outside.
Claire?
Reed's voice came soft in the darkness. What you said during the fever, about not knowing how to trust completely anymore. You don't have to. I understand it. He turned on his side to face her across Mira's sleeping form. After Margaret died, I built walls, told myself it was to protect Mira, but really it was to protect me, from feeling, from wanting, from the possibility of loss. Claire shifted carefully, mindful of her bruised ribs, until she too was facing him, in the firelight. His eyes were more silver than blue. What changed? You walked through my door. His voice was barely above a whisper. Wearing your own walls like armor, but still brave enough to try. Still kind enough to reach past Mira's silence. Still strong enough to birth foals and face down gossips and climb into burning barns. Reed? I'm not asking for promises, he continued. I'm not asking you to forget what came before or pretend the scars don't matter. I'm just asking, hoping, that maybe we could try, together. Claire's throat tightened. She reached across Mira, her hand finding his in the flickering light. I don't know how to be a wife again. I don't know how to be a husband again. His thumb traced across her knuckles. Maybe we don't have to be what we were. Maybe we can be something new. A log shifted in the fire, sending up a shower of sparks. Mira stirred but didn't wake, instinctively curling closer to Claire. The trust in that small movement, the unquestioning faith that Claire would be there, would keep her safe, broke something open in Claire's chest. The scar, she whispered. It's not just on the outside. Inside, I'm burned too, damaged. I may never be. You're not damaged. Reed's voice carried fierce certainty. You're marked by survival. There's a difference. Claire felt tears sliding into her hair. Reed's hand tightened on hers. Ask me again. She breathed.
Whatever you're thinking but not saying, ask me.
He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer.
Then, stay. Not as my employee, not as Mira's governess. Stay as what we've already become, family. And maybe, when you're ready, if you ever are, maybe more.
The storm chose that moment to intensify, shaking the house with renewed fury. But in their small circle of firelight, Claire felt only stillness, peace, possibility.
Yes, she whispered. Reed's breath caught. Yes to staying. Yes to all of it, to trying, to becoming whatever we're meant to become. She squeezed his hand. I can't promise it will be easy. I still have nightmares. I still flinch when people stare. Claire, he stopped her gently. I'm not looking for easy. I'm looking for real. For someone who understands that love after loss is different, but not less. Someone who won't try to erase Margaret from our lives, but will help us carry her memory while building something new. And you? She asked. Can you accept that I'll always carry Thomas with me too? Not the man he became, but the man he was. The complexity of loving someone who hurt you. I can accept all of you, Reed said simply, even the parts that still hurt, especially those. They lay there, hands clasped across the sleeping child between them, while the storm raged on. Eventually, exhaustion pulled Claire towards sleep, but just before she drifted off, she felt Reed's lips brush across her knuckles, light as snowfall, warm as summer. Sleep, he murmured. I'll keep watch. The words, an echo of what he'd told her months ago on another cold night, wrapped around her like a promise. She slept, and for the first time in 2 years, her dreams held no fire. Morning brought stillness. The storm had blown itself out, leaving the world transformed under feet of new snow. Claire woke to find Reed already up, feeding the fire, but Mira had migrated fully into Claire's arms during the night. The horses,
Claire said, starting to rise. Can wait a few more minutes. Reed knelt beside them, brushing hair back from his daughter's face, his fingers grazing Claire's cheek in the process. This is nice. Mira stirred, opening sleepy eyes, seeing both adults watching her. She smiled, that rare, precious expression that transformed her small face. Then, with the casual acceptance of children, she snuggled deeper into Claire's embrace and promptly fell back asleep. She knows, Reed said softly. Somehow, she's known all along what took us months to figure out. Children often do. Claire carefully shifted her bruised ribs. They see with their hearts. Recognizing, Reed agreed. When they finally rose to face the day's challenges, something fundamental had shifted. They moved around each other with new awareness, hands brushing as they passed, eyes meeting across the breakfast table. Small smiles shared over Mira's head. The child, for her part, seemed to glow with quiet satisfaction. As they worked together to dig out from the storm, she kept drawing hearts in the snow, pointing at them, then at Reed and Claire with obvious meaning. Subtle as a sledgehammer. Reed muttered, but he was smiling. That evening, after the horses were tended and paths were cleared, after supper was eaten and Mira was tucked in bed, Claire and Reed found themselves alone in the parlor, without the excuse of the storm, without Mira between them. The new understanding felt fragile, tentative. I meant it, Reed said suddenly. Everything I said last night. So did I. Claire touched her scars self-consciously. But Reed, the town, will have to adjust. He moved closer, not touching but near enough that she could feel his warmth. Though I was thinking, a spring wedding might quiet the worst of the gossips. Claire's heart stopped. Are you asking? I'm suggesting. His smile was crooked, vulnerable. When you're ready, if you ever are, no rush, no pressure, just possibility. She thought about possibility, about trust rebuilt slowly, carefully, like a house raised from ashes, about love that knew the weight of loss and chose to risk again anyway. "Spring sounds nice," she said softly. Reed's face transformed with a joy so profound it took her breath away. This time, when he reached for her hand, she met him halfway. Outside, the moon rose over the snow-covered valley, turning everything to silver. Inside, two people who'd forgotten how to hope began to remember, one careful, precious step at a time. The letter arrived on an unseasonably warm April morning, carried by a special courier who waited nervously while Claire signed for it. She recognized the Boston postmark, the expensive paper, the precise handwriting of a law firm. Her hands trembled as she opened it in the kitchen. Reed was out with the spring colts, Mira helping him in the corral. Claire was grateful for the solitude as she read. Asterisk, Dear Mrs. Hartley. Asterisk. We regret to inform you of the passing of Mr. Josiah Hartley, your late husband's father, as specified in his will. You are named as a beneficiary. Your presence is required in Boston to claim your inheritance, which includes a substantial sum and property holdings. Asterisk. Furthermore, the Hartley family wishes to discuss your situation and extend an offer for you to return to your rightful place in society. Your husband's unfortunate choices should not condemn you to exile. Claire set the letter down with shaking hands. She'd thought that chapter of her life closed, the door barred and locked, but here was the past, reaching out with golden fingers to pull her back. She was still sitting there, staring at the letter, when Mira burst through the door. The child's face was bright with excitement as she tugged at Claire's sleeve, pointing outside. But seeing Claire's expression, she stopped, her small face creasing with worry. "It's all right, sweetheart," Claire managed. "Just unexpected news." Mira made the sign they'd developed for sad, and Claire nodded. The child immediately wrapped her arms around Claire's waist, offering the uncomplicated comfort that only children could give. Reed found them that way when he came in for the noon meal. His expression shifted from contentment to concern in an instant. "What's happened?" Claire wordlessly handed him the letter. She watched his face change as he read surprise, understanding, and finally something that looked like fear. "A substantial inheritance," he said carefully. That's good news, isn't it?" "Is it?" Claire stood, moving to the window. "Reed, they're offering me my old life back. Money, position, a return to society." "And you're considering it?" The hurt in his voice made her turn. "No, I mean, I don't know. I thought I'd left all that behind, but what if it's not fair to you, to Mira? I'm bringing nothing to this. To us. No dowry, no connections, just scars and complicated history. And now they're offering you." "Stop!" Reed's voice was firm. He crossed to her, taking her shoulders gently. "What you bring to us can't be measured in money or social position. You bring life, Claire, joy, hope. You brought my daughter back to me, and you brought me back to myself." Mira, who had been watching with anxious eyes, suddenly ran to her slate. She wrote quickly and held it up. "Don't go!" "Oh, sweetheart." Claire knelt beside her. "I'm not." But Mira was already writing again, "Mama Claire stays here." The word mama hit Claire like a physical blow. In all these months, through all their closeness, Mira had never used that word. She looked up at Reed, seeing her own shock reflected in his face. "Mira," he said gently, "do you mean that?" The child nodded fiercely, then wrote more, "Real mama in heaven, Claire mama here. Both love me." Claire felt tears streaming down her face. She pulled Mira close, looking over the child's head at Reed. "How can I leave after that?" "You can't," he said simply. "But Claire, this is your choice. If you need to go to Boston, to settle things, to be sure." "I don't need to be sure." She stood, still holding Mira. "But I should respond.
They deserve that courtesy at least. That evening, after Mira was in bed, she'd been especially clingy all day. As if afraid Claire might disappear, Claire sat at Reed's desk to write her reply. Reed stood behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "What will you tell them?" Claire dipped the pen in ink, considering. Then she began to write. Asterisk, gentlemen, asterisk. Asterisk. Thank you for informing me of Mr. Josiah Hartley's passing. While I appreciate the gesture, I must decline both the inheritance and the family's offer. Asterisk, I have found my rightful place in society here in Wyoming Territory, where I am valued for my work and character rather than my connections. I am to be married this spring to a good man who sees my scars as marks of survival, not shame. Asterisk, please distribute my portion of the inheritance among Thomas's cousins. I need nothing from the Hartley estate. Asterisk, I wish you all well. Asterisk, respectfully. Asterisk, asterisk, Claire Mitchell. Hartley. Asterisk, asterisk. Soon to be Claire Thatcher, asterisk. It's done, she said, sealing the letter. Reed's hand settled on her shoulder. No regrets. None. She covered his hand with hers. My life is here now. You're sure Boston society, comfortable wealth, cold rooms and colder people, pity disguised as charity, a lifetime of being poor Claire who couldn't keep her husband from destroying himself. She turned in the chair to face him. Here, I'm just Claire. Sometimes I'm Miss Claire who saved the foal, or Mama Claire who tells the best stories. That's worth more than any inheritance. Reed pulled her to her feet, his hands framing her face. You know I would understand if you needed... Reed Thatcher, are you trying to talk me out of marrying you? Never. I'm trying to make sure you never regret. Claire silenced him by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his, the first kiss they'd shared, born of certainty and choice. When she pulled back, Reed's eyes were wide with surprise. I could have Boston society, she said softly. Or I could have Sunday mornings teaching Mira to braid bread. I could have a fortune in money. Or a fortune in watching you gentle a wild colt. I could have my place in their world. Or my place in yours. It's not a hard choice. Reed, not anymore. He kissed her then, properly, thoroughly, until they were both breathless. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. Spring can't come fast enough, he murmured. 10 days, she reminded him. We agreed on the 20th. 9 days, 22 hours, and 37 minutes. Not that I'm counting. Claire laughed a real laugh, the kind that transformed her whole face. She saw Reed's expression soften with wonder. There it is, he said quietly. The smile Mira asked about all those months ago. You make me remember how, Claire admitted. A sound from the doorway made them turn. Mira stood there in her nightgown, slate in hand. She'd written, Kissing means wedding soon. Yes, little bird, Reed said, not even trying to look stern. Very soon. Mira beamed and ran to them, wrapping an arm around each adult's waist. She made a new sign, one Claire hadn't seen before, both hands over her heart, then extended toward them. What does that mean? Claire asked. Reed's voice was thick with emotion. It means my family. She made it up after her mother died, but this is the first time she's used it since. They stood there, the three of them, in a circle of lamplight while the spring wind rattled the windows gently. The letter to Boston lay on the desk, waiting for tomorrow's post. But tonight, there was only this moment, this choice, this family being born not from blood or obligation, but from love tested by fire and found true. Later, as Claire tucked Mira back into bed, the child caught her hand. She pointed to herself, then to Claire, then made the sign for same. Same how, sweetheart? Mira touched her throat, where no scar showed but where words stayed trapped. Then she touched Claire's scar with infinite gentleness. She made the sign for hurt, followed by the sign for better. Yes, Claire whispered. We're both getting better, aren't we?
Mira nodded and pulled Claire down for a goodnight kiss. As Claire left the room, she heard something that made her freeze a sound so soft she might have imagined it. But no, there it was again. Mira was humming just a few notes, barely audible, but unmistakably real. Claire flew down the stairs to find Reed. "She's humming, Reed. She's making sounds." He caught her as she nearly crashed into him, spinning her around in a circle. "First sounds in 4 years," he said in wonder. The doctor said if she ever started vocalizing again, speech might follow. "Spring brings all sorts of new beginnings," Claire said, breathless from the spinning and the joy. "Yes," Reed agreed, setting her down but keeping her close. "It does." 9 days, Claire thought. 9 days until she became Claire Thatcher. 9 days until this liminal space between past and future became simply present. 9 days until the choice made tonight became the life lived tomorrow. Outside, a nightbird called across the valley, a sound like hope given wings. Inside, a little girl hummed herself to sleep while 2 adults who'd thought themselves broken discovered they were only weathered, like good wood that grows stronger for surviving the storm. The letter to Boston could wait for morning. Tonight was for celebrating small miracles and large mercies, for kissing in doorways and spinning in kitchens, for choosing love over money and home over houses, for choosing to stay. The lightning struck just after midnight, 3 days before the wedding. Claire woke to the sharp smell of smoke and the orange glow flickering through her window. For a moment, she was frozen, transported back to another night, another fire, another life ending in flames. Then she heard the horses screaming. She flew from her bed, not bothering with shoes or wrapper, racing down the stairs to find Reed already heading for the door. "The barn," he said tersely. "Lightning hit the barn." They ran together across the yard, the spring grass cold and wet beneath Claire's bare feet. The new barn rebuilt just last year was ablaze, flames licking up the eastern wall where the hay was stored. Inside, horses whinnied in terror, trapped in their stalls. "I'll get the horses," Reed shouted over the roar. "You get Mira away from the windows and fetch the ranch hands." But Claire was already running toward the barn. "We do this together or not at all." They plunged into the smoke-filled interior. Claire's throat burned, her eyes streamed, but she forced herself forward. This time, she wasn't trapped. This time, she had a choice, and she chose to fight. Reed was already releasing the horses, who bolted for safety the moment their stall doors opened. Claire grabbed lead ropes, guiding the panicked animals through the smoke, the foals they'd saved now yearlings huddled in the far stall, too terrified to move. "I've got them," Claire called, wrapping her arms around one trembling neck while Reed grabbed the other. They stumbled out together, coughing and gasping, as Tom Henley and the other ranch hands came running with buckets. But it was already too late for the barn. The fire had caught the hay stores, turning the structure into a torch against the night sky. "You let it go," Reed ordered, his voice rough from smoke. "Save the other buildings. Wet down the house roof." As the men formed a bucket brigade, Claire suddenly realized Mira wasn't with them. "Where's Papa?" The scream cut through the night like a blade. Everyone froze. Mira stood in the doorway of the house, her face white with terror. And she was screaming, actually screaming for the first time in 4 years. "Papa, Claire." Reed dropped the bucket and ran to his daughter, scooping her up as she sobbed hysterically. "We're here, little bird. We're safe. We're all safe." "Fire," Mira sobbed, speaking, forming actual words. "Fire came back, like Mama. Fire took Mama." "No, sweetheart." Claire reached them, wrapping her arms around both. "The fire didn't take anyone. We're all here. The horses are safe. We're safe." Mira buried her face in Reed's shoulder, but her hand clutched Claire's nightgown. "Don't go in fire," she whimpered. "Please don't go in fire." "Never alone," Claire promised, her own tears mixing with the soot on her face. "Never again." They stood there, the three of them holding each other, while behind them the barn collapsed in a shower of sparks. The ranch hands had the bucket line well organized now, protecting the other structures. But Claire barely noticed. All her attention was on the miracle of Mira's voice, hoarse from disuse, but unmistakably real. "Hurts to talk," Mira whispered. "Then don't force it," Reed said gently. "You've said the important things." But Mira shook her head, looking at Claire with those solemn green eyes. "Wedding," she said carefully. "Fire won't stop wedding." "Nothing could stop this wedding," Claire assured her. "Not fire, not floods, not all the troubles in the world." They spent the rest of the night on the porch, wrapped in blankets, watching the barn burn down to embers. Mira dozed between them, occasionally murmuring words in her sleep. A dam burst, releasing 4 years of silence. As dawn broke over the valley, revealing the smoking ruin where the barn had stood, Samuel Hicks arrived with his wagon. He'd seen the glow from town and come to help. "Good Lord," he breathed, taking in the destruction. "What'll you do now?" "Reed, that's a year's worth of hay gone, not to mention the building." Reed surveyed the damage with steady eyes. "We'll rebuild, start cutting timber today." He glanced at Claire. "Though we might need to postpone." "No," Claire's voice was firm. "We're getting married in 3 days as planned." "Claire, be practical. I need to focus on rebuilding, yes, and we'll do it together, as a family, but first, we make that official." She touched his soot-stained face. "I won't let another fire dictate my life. Reed, not this time." Mira stirred in Reed's arms. "Mama Claire is right," she said, her new voice still wondering at itself. "Family first, then barn." Hicks cleared his throat, visibly moved. "Well then, guess I'll spread the word in town. Folks will want to help with the raising once you've got timber cut." "And the wedding?" Claire asked. The old driver grinned. "Ma'am, after what this valley's seen you pulling Reed's daughter out of silence, him bringing you back to life, I think folks would riot if you postponed. Fire or no fire." The next 3 days passed in a blur of activity. Reed and the ranch hands cut timber while Claire organized the salvage of what could be saved. Mira shadowed them both, her voice growing stronger with each passing hour. She didn't speak constantly. Years of silence had made her thoughtful about words, but when she did, it was with purpose. "Why now?" Claire asked her the evening before the wedding, as they stood looking at the clearing where the new barn would rise. "What made you speak again?" Mira considered carefully. "Scared," she said finally. "More scared of losing you and Papa than of talking." "Oh, sweetheart." Claire gathered her close. "You'll never lose us." "Promise." The word was small, vulnerable. "I promise." The wedding day dawned clear and bright, as if nature itself had decided to bless the union. Claire stood before the mirror in her room, wearing a simple blue dress, her best, saved for special occasions. The scar on her neck was clearly visible above the modest neckline. Once, she would have tried to hide it. Now, she let it show. It was part of her story, part of what had brought her here. Mira appeared in the doorway wearing her own best dress, yellow as sunshine. "Pretty," she said, then added with a shy smile, "Both of us." They walked to the church together, Reed having gone ahead with Tom Henley. The building was fuller than Claire had expected, apparently. News of Mira's voice returning had spread, and folks wanted to witness what many were calling a miracle. But Claire had eyes only for Reed, standing at the altar in his Sunday suit, looking at her like she was everything good in the world. His expression when he saw Mira walking beside her, their daughter in all but blood, was almost too private to witness. The ceremony was simple. Reverend Morrison Adelaide's long-suffering husband spoke about new beginnings rising from ashes, about love that chooses to build rather than abandon. When he asked for the rings, Mira stepped forward proudly, speaking clear as a bell. "I have them, for my papa and my new mama." There wasn't a dry eye in the church when Reed kissed his bride. The scar on her neck and the ones they both carried inside seemed to matter not at all. They were simply two people who had found each other across loss and loneliness, choosing to face whatever came next together. The reception was held in the yard between house and burned barn, a deliberate choice. Tables groaned under the weight of food brought by neighbors. Someone had hung lanterns in the trees, and a fiddle player struck up dancing tunes as the sun set. No fancy Boston wedding breakfast, Claire murmured to Reed as they took their first dance as husband and wife. "Disappointed?" he asked, spinning her carefully. "Never." She looked around at the gathered faces, ranchers and townfolk, even Mrs. Morrison, who had brought a cake and a grudging smile. "This is real. This is ours." "Mama Claire," Mira ran up, tugging at Claire's skirt. "Dance with me too." They made room for her in their circle, the three of them swaying together to the music. Around them, their community celebrated not just a wedding but a resurrection, a family reborn from silence and sorrow. Later, as the party wound down and guests began departing, Reed and Claire stood looking at the stars. Tomorrow would bring the hard work of rebuilding, of merging two broken hearts into one whole life. But tonight, there was only this: the soft sound of Mira singing herself to sleep in the house behind them, the gentle pressure of Reed's hand in hers, the vast Wyoming sky holding them all. "No regrets?" Reed asked softly. Claire thought of the burned barn, the Boston fortune refused, the scars that would never fully fade. Then she thought of Mira's voice saying "Mama," of Reed's steady presence through every storm, of the life they were choosing to build on the ashes of what had been. "None," she said, and meant it. "Not one." The night wind carried the last traces of smoke away across the valley, leaving only the clean scent of spring and new beginnings. Inside the house, their daughter slept peacefully, her voice restored. Outside, two people who had learned that love could survive the flame stood together, ready for whatever dawn would bring. They were home. The new house by the creek took shape slowly through the summer months. Reed had started it the week after their wedding, declaring that while the old house held good memories, they deserved a fresh start, a home built by their own hands for the family they were becoming. Claire worked alongside him when she could, learning to handle lumber and tools with the same quiet competence she'd once reserved for medical instruments. Mira helped too, her chatter filling the air where once there had been only silence. Her voice, unused for so long, had a musical quality to it, rising and falling like the creek itself. "Why build here?" Claire asked one evening as they sat on the half-finished porch, watching the sunset paint the valley gold. "Why not closer to the old house?" Reed pulled her against his side, his arm warm around her shoulders. "Margaret chose the site for the old house. It was a good choice for who we were then." He paused, his thumb tracing absent circles on her arm. "But you and I, we're something different. We've both been through fire. Seemed fitting to build by water this time." The summer had been kind to them. The barn raising in June had brought the whole valley together, neighbors setting aside old grudges to help rebuild what the fire had taken. Even Adelaide Morrison had come, bringing her daughters and enough food for 20 men. She'd pulled Claire aside during the lunch break, her stern face softer than Claire had ever seen it. "I owe you an apology," the older woman had said stiffly. "I judged hastily, harshly. I see now what you've brought to this family." She'd glanced at Mira, who was laughing as Tom Henley swung her around. "That child's voice is a miracle. And Reed, I haven't seen him this alive since Margaret took sick." "Thank you," Claire had said simply, understanding the effort those words had cost. Now, as August waned into September, the house stood nearly complete. It wasn't grand 3 bedrooms, a kitchen with windows facing east for morning light, a parlor with a stone fireplace that Reed had built with special care, but it was theirs, every board and nail a promise of permanence. Mama Claire Mira appeared beside them, holding her latest drawing. "Look what I made." The picture showed their new house, smoke curling peacefully from the chimney. 3 figures standing before it. But now there were 4 figures, the fourth much smaller than the others. Claire's breath caught.
Mira, what?
For the baby, Mira said matter-of-factly.
When the baby comes.
Claire felt Reed go still beside her. They'd been careful, private, thinking to wait until they were more certain before saying anything. But children, as Claire had learned, saw with different eyes.
How did you know?
Claire asked softly.
Mira shrugged. You sing more, and you put your hand here sometimes.
She demonstrated, placing her small hand on her own stomach.
Mama did that before she got too sick. She said I would have a brother or sister, but then... Oh, sweetheart.
Claire pulled the girl close.
Are you all right with the idea of a baby?
Mira nodded firmly.
Babies need families. We're a good family.
Reed found his voice at last.
Yes,
he said roughly.
We are.
That night, as they lay in their bed in the old house they'd moved to the new one next week, Reed placed his hand carefully on Claire's still flat stomach.
How long have you known?
He asked. 2 months. I wanted to be sure, after what happened before. He was quiet, understanding. Claire had told him about the miscarriages during her first marriage, how Thomas had blamed her for failing to give him an heir, how that failure had driven another wedge between them. This is different, Reed said firmly. Everything about this is different.
I know.
She covered his hand with hers.
But I'm still scared.
Then we'll be scared together. He kissed her temple. Seems to be what we do best, face the frightening things together. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor. A well-dressed man on a fine horse rode up to the ranch, looking distinctly out of place. Claire recognized the type city lawyer, probably from Denver or even farther east.
I'm looking for Mrs. Claire Thatcher, formerly Hartley, he announced.
Claire stepped forward, Reed moving protectively beside her.
I'm Claire Thatcher.
The man dismounted and removed a packet from his saddlebags. Ma'am, I'm James Prescott from Boston. I'm afraid I bring news of another death. Mrs. Prudence Hartley, your late husband's mother, passed last month. Claire felt nothing but a distant sadness. She'd barely known Thomas's mother, a cold woman who'd made it clear she blamed Claire for not preventing her son's downward spiral.
I see, she said quietly. Thank you for coming all this way to tell me.
There's more. The lawyer looked uncomfortable. Despite your refusal of the previous inheritance, Mrs. Hartley specifically named you in her will. She left you a letter and, well, a rather unusual bequest. He handed her the letter. Claire opened it with steady hands, aware of Reed reading over her shoulder. Asterisk Claire, asterisk. Asterisk. I was wrong. My son destroyed himself, and in my grief, I blamed you for not saving him. But no one can save someone who doesn't wish to be saved. I know that now. Asterisk. You survived what he did to you. You found happiness despite the scars he left. That takes a courage I never had. Asterisk. I leave you not money. I know you have no need of Hartley gold. Instead, I leave you my mother's medical texts, the ones I forbade you to read when you lived under my roof. Use them well. Teach your daughter, for I hear you have one now, that knowledge is power, and power means never being trapped. Asterisk. Live well. It is the best revenge against those who would see us broken. Asterisk. Prudence Hartley. Asterisk. Claire blinked back unexpected tears. Behind her, she heard Mira ask,
What's wrong, Mama?
Nothing's wrong, sweetheart. Sometimes tears are just complicated. The lawyer produced a small trunk from his wagon. The books, ma'am. There are also some medical instruments that Mrs. Hartley thought you might appreciate. After he left, Claire sat surrounded by the treasures Prudence had sent. Medical texts she'd only glimpsed before. Instruments of quality she'd never been allowed to touch. Tools of a trade she'd learned in fragments and shadows.
You miss it,
Reed said. It wasn't a question. The medical work. Sometimes.
She ran her fingers over a leather-bound anatomy text. I was good at it. Thomas hated that I was good at it. What if... Reed paused, clearly thinking. What if you didn't have to miss it? Doc Morrison is getting on in years. He's mentioned needing help, especially with women's troubles and birthing. Claire looked up at him. You'd be all right with that, your wife, working outside the home. My wife saved my daughter's voice and my own heart. Reed said simply, I'd be a fool to keep those gifts locked away just for us. Mira, who'd been examining the instruments with careful fingers, looked up. You could help people, Mama, like you helped the horses and me and Papa. And so it began. Claire started spending 2 days a week with Doc Morrison, learning what Thomas had refused to teach her, helping with cases he found difficult. The women of the valley, initially skeptical, soon realized that Claire understood their bodies and their fears in ways the old doctor couldn't. By October, when they finally moved into the new house, Claire had established herself as an unofficial midwife and women's nurse. The same women who'd once whispered about the scarred widow now sought her out, trusting her with their most intimate concerns. The day they moved in, Reed carried Claire over the threshold despite her laughing protests about her condition. Mira ran ahead, claiming her new room with delighted squeals. They'd given her the one with morning sun and a view of the pastures where the horses grazed. That evening, as their first night in the new home settled around them, Claire stood at the kitchen window, watching the last light fade from the sky. She touched her scar, absently still there, always there, but no longer the first thing she thought of each morning. Reed came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her expanding waist. Happy? Yes. She leaned back into his warmth. It's strange. If you'd asked me 2 years ago if I could be happy again, I'd have said no. Happiness seemed like something that belonged to the woman I was before the fire. And now I know happiness isn't about being unscathed. It's about choosing to build something beautiful with the pieces you have left. Mira appeared in the doorway. Story time. They gathered in the parlor. Mira curled between them on the new sofa Reed had built. Claire began another tale, this one about a bird who lost her song but found it again with the help of new friends. Like me, Mira said drowsily when it ended. Yes, little bird, Reed agreed. Just like you. As Claire tucked Mira into bed in her new room, the child caught her hand. Mama, will you teach me the medical things when I'm bigger, from the books the sad grandmother sent? If you'd like to learn, yes. Good, Mira yawned. Want to help people too, like you and Papa help people. Walking back to their room, Claire found Reed standing by the window, looking out at the star-filled sky. She joined him, fitting perfectly under his arm. I've been thinking about Margaret, he said quietly. Today especially, moving into the new house, wondering what she'd think. Claire waited, understanding this was important. I think she'd be glad, he continued. She wanted Mira to have a mother who could teach her strength. She wanted me to find someone who understood that love after loss is different but not less. He turned to face Claire. She would have liked you. I would have liked her too. Claire meant it. Margaret lived in this family not as a ghost to be exorcised, but as a cherished memory to be honored. She raised a wonderful daughter. She loved a good man. She sounds like someone I would have been proud to know. That night, Claire wrote a letter to her friend from Denver. Asterisk, Dear Sarah. Asterisk. You asked in your last letter if I ever regret refusing the Hartley fortune. If I ever wonder what my life might have been had I chosen Boston society over a Wyoming ranch. I'm sitting in a house my husband built with his own hands for us. Our daughter, yes, our she calls me Mama, now sleeps peacefully down the hall. New life grows within me. Tomorrow, I'll help birth a neighbor's baby, then come home to tend my garden and kiss my family goodnight. Asterisk. He didn't save me from the fire. Sarah. He just stood beside me, so I no longer feared it. He didn't erase my scars. He helped me see them as proof of survival rather than shame. He didn't promise me a life without pain.
He promised to face whatever comes together. Asterisk. So no, I have no regrets. I am exactly where I belong, with the people who belong to me. The fire brought me here, and for that, strange as it sounds, I'm grateful. Asterisk, your friend. Asterisk, Claire, asterisk. Later, as she lay beside Reed. Feeling the baby move for the first time, tiny flutters like butterfly wings. Claire touched her scar one more time. It was part of her, would always be part of her, but it no longer defined her. Sleep, Reed murmured, already half drowsing. I'll keep watch. The familiar words wrapped around her like a blanket. Outside, the creek sang its endless song. Inside, their daughter dreamed in her sun-bright room. New life quickened under Claire's heart. And in the space between memory and hope, between what was lost and what was found, Claire Thatcher finally, fully, came home. Thank you for listening to this story from the American frontier. If you're hearing this tale of love and redemption, please share in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to connect and hear your thoughts about Claire and Reed's journey. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 for more authentic tales from America's past. If this story touched your heart, please like the video and hit the hype button to help more listeners discover these powerful stories of courage, hope, and second chances in the Old West.